Yeah. Can I just say what a blessing it is for that worship with Katura? It was really great that she's stepping up and just how many wonderfully instrumentally gifted people we have in the church. All things considered for that. But I do want to welcome everyone here to really Good Friday because Easter is right around the corner. And as I was talking to Amy, she was saying that she'd been invited to 3 other Easter services. That's amazing. That's awesome. I love when people are like, I've been invited to other places, I can't help but overjoy. And when it's like, so I can't go to yours. That's okay. Just go to one. Like I said, it's the same Jesus that is preached here is preached there. Okay, I hope. Like that is it, So that's what we're all about, right? But also, Good Friday is normally kind of iffy for some people. They're like, do I go? Do I not go? Easter's always the big one, but maybe not necessarily Good Friday, especially on a Friday, because I know we're all very busy and very popular people. There's probably 6 parties, like a Blue Man Group we could have gone to on Las Vegas. But you know what? I just want to say thank you for being here. Because as much as important as Easter is, and it is, it's amazing. You kind of can't have a resurrection without death. And the only thing that, as I've said, the only thing that makes today Good Friday with a capital G is because of what happened on Sunday, on Easter. That's what makes this good. And then we at Navigation Church, we have one mission. And that is we exist to live the truth in love, to lead others to Christ, and grow deeper in our relationship with Him. That's why we exist. And tonight we're going to live that truth together, the truth of Jesus Christ and what He did for us. So I wanted to ask you something. Have you ever done something in the moment that you knew you were going to regret later? Okay, and this isn't something like, I might regret this. This is something like, I know I'm going to regret this. Like, I'm doing this, and you're like, you don't want to do this. It's going to be bad. And you're like, nah, I'm going to do it anyway. There's a little voice in your head that's like, this isn't going to end well. And you're like, you know what? Let's do it anyway. You went through with it. We all, for some reason, have those moments. I don't know why. We all have those moments. But some more than others. For me, it's eating right before bed. Okay? For some reason, my body's like, hey, we're about to go to sleep in 5 minutes. You know what we should do? Eat 2,000 calories. And I'm like, this is not going to help. It's like, you know what? Do it anyway. Why not? I was like, for some reason, you know what? You got me. I should probably go eat a big meal. But most of the time, what's interesting about those, however, is even though we know it's going to kind of come back and bite us, even though we do it anyway, most of the time the consequences don't happen immediately, right? They're delayed. And I think if they happened immediately, we would probably not do it, But it's because of that delay that oftentimes we have that little out of, maybe it's not going to be so bad. Maybe it's not, If every unhealthy habit had an immediate cost, we probably would have a lot less of them. But as we know, life just doesn't work that way, right? It just doesn't. There's often a delay, and because there's the delay, we either don't think it's as serious, or worse yet, that the consequences might not even ever happen, right? It might never happen. There was a famous study, here's the thing, there was a famous study done at Stanford University in 1972. It was done by a researcher named Walter Mischel. And he had children sit down, and he put a marshmallow in front of them, and he explained to them, he said, if you don't eat this marshmallow, I'm going to go away in 15 minutes, and when I come back in 15 minutes, you don't eat the marshmallow, you get another marshmallow. It's pretty, it was cut and dry. They knew exactly, the conditions were set. It's this is, if you eat it, and they said, if you eat it, no problem. You'll have it, but you won't get the next marshmallow. If you wait 15 minutes, you get another one. Pretty cut and dry. And he found out that 2/3 of the children couldn't wait 15 minutes. 2/3. That even though they understood the reward, they still just were like, nah, I want it. They chose what was right in front of them instead of what was coming later. And they did a follow-up study, and it showed that they tried to they actually had a correlation between the people who could wait for 15 minutes and those who couldn't, and found out that those who could wait had higher SAT scores, they had higher outlooks in life, and their obviously the connection that they're trying to say is like, if you can wait for better rewards, then probably you're going to do things that might be in your best interest versus someone who's just like, no, I want here and now and whatnot. But that same reality, I want to say, shows up a little more than just marshmallows, right? It shows up in sin. That we do sin and we think like, nah, yeah, this might be wrong, but it won't be as bad. It won't happen right now. And to be told, most of the consequences don't actually show up immediately. And I believe like if they did, you might do less of it, but it doesn't. But from the beginning, God always made it very apparent that sin would lead to death, and the sad part is that it wasn't a maybe, it wasn't under certain circumstances, it wasn't an asterisk. In fact, God didn't even give any fine points or legalese. He just said, hey, if you sin, it's going to lead to death. And that's why what we see on the cross was so important, because it wasn't just the end of Jesus' life, it was the payment for our sin. It was the payment for a lot of what we did, and it was delayed. It was a delay. And that's what Good Friday is about. So if you have your Bibles, we'll actually read about it. So we start in the Gospel of Luke. It's the fourth book, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The third. And we start out in chapter 23. And if you don't have your Bibles, that's okay. It'll be up on the screen. But we're going to be in Luke chapter 23. And we're going to start out in verse 35. So a little bit further down. You might even have to turn the page. And we're going to go through to verse 46. So it says this: the people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. This is Jesus on the cross. And they said, he saved others, let him save himself. And if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one. The soldiers also came up and mocked him, and they offered him wine vinegar and said, if you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. And there was a written notice above him, which read, this is the king of the Jews. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. He said, aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminals rebuked him. Don't you fear God? He said, since you are under the same sentence, we're punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. And it was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until about 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he said this, he breathed his last. Well, this I think is the end of something profound. I actually think to understand the crucifixion, we actually have to go much further back, to understand ourselves, understand God. And the first part that I wanted to say, which I said in the introduction, is that sin always leads to death. Because the struggle that we just talked about is that oftentimes the weight of our decisions don't happen right away. That they come back, in the future. But that's actually nothing new, right? Like, people have been making mistakes for a long time. That's not a today thing. But the first mistake was all the way back in the garden. That's actually where, if you go back to the garden, you'll actually see the problem of why the crucifixion was so important. And I wanted to show you this. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, it says this: God set the standard clearly. He said, you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Certainly die. And like I said, that's kind of the ground rule. There wasn't an asterisk, at least in the Bible, there's not an asterisk. There's not like legal, this isn't even like legalese. This is like I don't know if this is even contractualized language that you could support in a contract. And yet, Jesus is like, here's the rule. Here's the rule. That God wasn't making, and by the way, God wasn't making rules to control people. A lot of people always, you see that in the Bible where it's like, God wants to control us. He was just explaining reality. Have you ever seen someone who you explain to them reality and they hate it? Where you're like, look, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just explaining to you like the sun rises in the east. And they're like, yeah, but it's so bright. And you're like, I'm sorry, I don't control the sun. I just want you to know, like, that's the reality. And how interestingly it is that so many people can hate reality. And even when you're just saying like, hey, I'm just letting you know. And yet that's kind of what God does, is that that's how life actually works. And a lot of times that's what God does, is he just explains how life works and then lets us decide. So when Adam and Eve ate the fruit, that's in the next chapter, the fall, which is in Genesis chapter 3, something has to give, right? But after they eat the fruit, if you have read, what happens? Actually, they don't drop dead. Like when they eat the fruit, they're not they don't take the bite and then fall over. No. They still live. And you might actually think, if you go back to the verse, you're like, wait a second, he said I'll surely die. I ate the fruit, nothing happened. So I guess God was wrong, right? What does God know? And yet, that's the idea, is that oftentimes things are delayed, right? Things are delayed. That it did come to them, it just didn't come in the way they expected. How often is that? I would say think about how loans work. Now, I know that some of us, we're a little older here, okay? Except for Amari, who I hope doesn't have loans yet, okay? But when you think about, for those of us who have had loans, okay? I've had to take a few loans in my life, unfortunately. Most people, they can't even get a house, right, without a loan. Some people can't get a car without a loan. Some people can't get a house with a loan. It's just it's getting real. But when you think about a loan, right, you get the loan, and when do you have to pay interest on it? Okay, now typically you pay interest on it the next pay period, right? Here's a better question. When do you start accruing interest? The second you sign that loan. You don't pay for it for 2 weeks, so they're well, we're not going to pay for it the second. But when do you start accruing interest? The second you sign that line. They're awesome, you now start owing us money, and you'll pay for 4 weeks later. And if you think, no, I don't want to, try quitting a loan 3 weeks in and be no, there's zero interest, right? I guarantee you there's interest, okay? And what will they say? They say, no, you're just paying us later. You started the second you got that loan. We want money. And that's kind of the way sin is. Is we can think oh, well, I'll pay for it a little bit further down. And it's yeah, no, 100% true. You will probably pay for it further down. But when you start accruing the problems, the second you do it. And sin works, like I said, sin works the same way. And that's what I want to say, is the payment for sin is often delayed. It's often delayed. In fact, very few sins are immediate. And I want to be honest. That's why I think so many people I don't need God, because they're I keep sinning and look at my amazing life. Why do I need God? I'm you're right. But tell me at the end of your life. And that's what happens, is that, and I would say that thankfully it wasn't left that way, right? So even though sin, the payment for sin, eventually comes and leads to death, it didn't end that way. And that's why I think that God always pointed forward to salvation. He always pointed towards a salvation that would come. And what's interesting is that God didn't change the rule. When God says, okay, I'll send my son, he didn't change the rule. He just said, I'm going to fulfill it. He didn't ignore it. And that's what we see at the cross, is that God is not rewriting rules. He's actually living in his set of rules. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, because I see so much of God, about God, is he's a hateful God. How could God be so good with all this bad things? And a lot of the cross is, well, he came in and lived it and died for it. And my whole thing is that what do we normally say for the people we truly hate, we truly are angry about? We say, well, I wish he would die. Well, that's what Jesus did. Jesus is actually following what you always tell other people when you're filled with so much hate and you don't like the way things are, that you go to the person who says, if you built the system, you know what, you should live under, you should have the consequences of your own rules. And Jesus did. And they still don't like it. They still don't like it. The same God who said sin leads to death is the same God who would walk to death on the cross. And I want to just stay in the garden just for a moment, because again, I think that if we understand what happened in the garden, you'll understand the cross, is that it begins with how Jesus, most people don't actually realize what has happened, because there's a verse that most even Christians don't understand. But I want to highlight my second point, and that is that God allows a substitute. So Adam and Eve, they know that they're evil. Like they know evil, right? So they take the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. So like that, now they know. But here's their response. It's in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7. It says this. It says, then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. It's like the second they realized, oh, something's going on, what did? They tried to cover themselves. They didn't go to God. They didn't like, man, I should go to God. What did they do? They ran and hide. And I kind of see that in a lot of like world today. When I see people where it's like, hey, are you going to go to God who solves? And they're like, no, I'm not going to go to God. I'm just going to run away from him. Yeah, if we're honest, like, it hasn't changed much, right? We still do the same thing. But I think it's how we try to face the shame, right? Because they felt shame that they were naked. And that's why I think when people are like, is the Bible so relatable? I say, well, I don't know. How do people face shame today? Do they address it? Do they run to fix? Or do they hide from it and cover it all up? And I said, I don't know. You tell me. I was like, so literally in the first 3 chapters of the Bible, and the first 1.5, by the way, are of course the creation story, so it doesn't even deal with Adam and Eve. Literally the first chapter and a half tells exactly how people have behaved since the dawn of time, and I look around and I say, man, things haven't changed much at all. But here's the thing that some people don't think about. Do you know that the first death ever recorded in the Bible was not Adam and Eve? In fact, it wasn't even a human. It was what God allowed as a substitute. So here's the thing. So just a few verses. This was 14 verses later. So after they eat the fruit, this is 14 verses. It says this. The Lord God, made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. The cost of sin was death. It just wasn't theirs. It just wasn't there. Where do you think like skin is like, there's this snake that's shedding. I'll just use that shed skin for... No. And that's what most people don't realize, is that when they said, oh, no, the cost was delayed, for them it was, absolutely. Not for these animals. And in fact, that was the substitute that has happened, well, until Christ, right? There was a scapegoat. In fact, that's the idea. And this is what I wanted to say as well, was that the cost of sin didn't vanish. God just changed who paid it. That's it. In fact, this, you can see, is all about Good Friday, right? Okay? Is that the cost of sin didn't vanish, we just changed who paid it. And that's the moment where a pattern is actually set up. God actually set up, so God had the rule and he set up a pattern. He said, the rule is sin leads to death, but the pattern is you can have a substitute. In fact, that's where a scapegoat comes, the word scapegoat, if you ever heard that term, it actually comes from sacrifice. It's the idea that we're going to put all of our problems, all of our sin onto a goat, and then we're going to release all of our sin, which then we took that and most of the time people talk about a scapegoat is like when you do something, you got to blame it on someone else, right? They're going to take the fall. But that's where this actually comes from. Most people don't know it. Here's something interesting. When I was first in seminary, so like taken many years in seminary, when I was first in seminary, I had to apply for student loans. Go back to loans, right? Oh, God, a lot of loans in life, okay? When I was first in seminary, I had to apply for a loan. And I know this sounds crazy, probably not too crazy, is that the school wouldn't even let me take the class unless it was fully paid for. They're like, yep, there's no IOUs, you have to pay them, and so if you don't have it, well, they'll give you loans, right? And so I remember that one time, the Office of Advising gave me a call, and they said, hey, the semester's coming up, and we see that you haven't paid. And I'm like, oh, okay, no worries. And I said, yeah, I'll pay. And they said, okay, well, we need to verify it's you. And I actually I kid you not, I stopped and I said, why? And they said, well, we need to know it's you to pay off your class. And I literally told them, if someone wants to pay off my class, let them. Yeah. Don't verify. I don't care who's paying off my class. Let them pay it off. And it was almost like she had never heard that before. I was like, why would I care who pays off my class? In fact, if someone was going to pay off my class, I'd have one question for them. Is this a one-time thing? Or can we take this till graduation? Right? Because that's the idea. It's like, why wouldn't I care if someone paid off my class? Beats it for me. And yet, the crazy part is, why don't we do that for sin? Like when Jesus says, I'll pay off your sin. Why don't we ask the same question of him? And yet he does. And that's what I said, is that from this moment, that's a pattern, right? I just want to bring everything together. Is that, the rule in the garden, sin leads to death, the pattern of substitution, like that's what happened, is that there was a sacrifice. And that's why at the cross, we see it fully recognized because of this, is that Jesus became the final substitution. That's what. So in fact, it was like we have an animal, and now we'll have Jesus. The pattern is still going to happen, but it's just now from Jesus. Don't worry, it'll go up there, but Katura's talking to Chris right now, so that's okay. Exactly. I'm glad someone's paying attention. Don't worry. Put up the third point. There you go. Thank you. Love you, son. It's okay, right? Here's the thing. It's Good Friday. It's good, right? So if we look at our passage, right, in Luke 23, there's a theme. Here's the thing. There's a theme that keeps showing up over and over again if you look in our passage, and it's people are watching Jesus on the cross, and two words keep coming up over and over and over again. Save yourself. Save yourself. If you are the Messiah, so the rulers scoff at him, hey, you better save yourself. The criminals scoff at him, the soldiers scoff at him, everyone. I mean, when you're getting scoffed at by the criminal that's hanging on the cross next to you, you got to ask yourself, right? Save yourself. But the interesting part is that one of the rulers said he saved others. So he said, he saved others, why can't he save himself? My question is, what did he save the others from? Like, if the rulers are saying he saved others, what did he exactly save them from that they think that he did? They'd seen him heal people. They'd seen him restore people. They'd seen him at least do some miracles, right? Some even saw him raise from the dead. And they know that there's something different about him. And yet, standing on the cross, all they can think about is he needs to save himself. That's what it's all about. That if you are who you say you are, you need to get yourself down. Because in their minds, here's the thing, in their minds, salvation means escape. And it always has been. If you have power, you're going to escape from your problems. If you have power, you're going to escape from the things that are painful to you, from the things that are inconveniencing to you, because that's what we would do with power, right? That's really, in a way, it's projection where they're like, if I was the Messiah, I would use my power to get luxury and life of luxury. Like, right, king? I'd be a king, right? Who wouldn't want a king? Servants, gold, luxury. That's why they don't understand what Jesus is doing. Because one thing is very apparent. They're not the Messiah. And they can't think like him. But here's, I want to put up a picture of the three crosses. I think we have that, yeah. Jesus is in the middle. And you have two criminals on both sides. And the Bible uses this kind of contrast actually very frequently, where there's two paths. So yes, there's three crosses, but one of them is Jesus. And two of them are people. Two of them represent humans. And this has come up over and over again in the Bible. Two crosses, two paths, two choices. There's a duality that's always in the Bible. And I want you to look how both respond. Both the criminals. So the reason why I chose Luke is that you actually see both criminals respond to Jesus. And what they say is very apparent because it's actually what is in our world today. So one of the criminals looks at him and says this. He says, "Are you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." Can we be honest? The save yourself does not matter. That this criminal does not care about Jesus saving himself. It's the us. And it's so nice. Save us. You know who's always included in us? Me. Really, if I want to simplify this for all the language, save me. If you are who you are, save me. That's what it is. If you're really powerful, get me out of this. But the other criminal sees something very different. He actually rebukes the first criminal. And he says, "We are punished justly for getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Here's my question to you. How does he know? How does he know? It's a true statement. Jesus has done nothing wrong. My question is, how does he know? Did he see some miracles? And I actually don't have an answer. Because it's never given to us. We don't know who this guy is. We don't even know if he's a Jew. We don't know if he's seen Jesus' miracles. We don't know if he's seen anything. And yet, for some reason, he knows Jesus is innocent. And he says, we're getting what we deserve, but this man is innocent and doesn't belong to us. And then he says something amazing. He doesn't say, save me. Okay? And that's what the first criminal says. I know what the text says. Let's all be honest. It's save me. That's what I want in a Messiah, is I want a guy, I want someone who takes me from a cross of death that I justly deserve and just gets me out of it. And the second guy doesn't say, hey, take me off this cross. He actually just says this. In Luke 4, in verse 42, he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I think we have it. He says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That means that he understood for some reason, for some point, that what Jesus was about and what Jesus was saying. He doesn't say, and what's amazing is that when you take it one step further, you say, if he knows that he has a kingdom, and you know he's actually the Messiah, wouldn't that entitle him to say, okay, I know you're the Messiah, and you have power, could you save me? And that's kind of the duality of the lost and the saved, is that the lost see God as just a solution to their immediate problems, and the saved see him as a Messiah, who's to be worshipped. And it's not that he can't solve our problems. It's just that he knows that he just wants to be remembered in his kingdom. He says, Jesus, remember me. And we're all one of those two men. That's what we are. We're all one of those two men. So in the middle of the cross is really the entire gospel message, is that Jesus is dying on the cross for sins. And by the way, for the sins of both men. Okay? Dying for the cross of both men, and one rejects him and one accepts him. And here's the big thing that I want to say as I finish up this point, is this is what makes Good Friday good. Is that Jesus, after the man on the criminal says, just remember me, Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise. And here's my question. What can that criminal do for Jesus? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Okay? He's not like, awesome. Now, like Jesus is not like, you'll get to heaven if you go get baptized. You'll go get heaven, if you go build a church. You'll go get heaven if after you get down off this cross, you then go tell everyone about me and you save people from me and you go to church every week. Like, that's what's going to get you to heaven. Jesus says, I know you're going to die in about, an hour. And I'm going to see you in heaven. And that is the gospel message, is that Jesus says, when he says, I want you to remember me, Jesus says, awesome, I absolutely will, and I'm meeting you. And there's nothing you have to do to get that. And this is proof positive that Jesus says something absolutely irrefutable, that you will be in heaven. And we know that man who will die and is going to die and is never talked about in the Gospels ever again, because crucifixion ends one way, that the man is doing absolutely nothing for Jesus, and he gets to heaven. And that is actually amazing, because it means that we don't have to earn our way. We don't have to do good things or stop doing bad things, though that is, Jesus would want. What we have to do is just have a relationship with God. That's what gets us. So, as we close tonight, I just want to bring it back to us today, right? What happened on the cross happened once. Thank goodness. But it's something that we have to go back to over and over and over again, right? So even though it happened once, it's something that we really do, because we still struggle with sin. And that's, and shame, so much shame, loneliness, longing for redemption. I think all of us do that because we're human. But I just want to leave you with two questions, just two, okay? So the first one is, are you still trying to pay for your sin? Or have you trusted Jesus to pay it for you? Because I see so much of our world that is trying to do it on their own. Okay? That they talk about no, I'm a good person. And they can never tell me their metric. They can never tell me the scales. They can never tell me the measurements. And they're like, I'm going to get to heaven because I'm a good person. And a lot of it is like, that's trying to pay off your own sin. I will say that the message of the cross, what's nice, the best thing about the cross, and I hope it never happens to any of us, is that none of us are directly told to die for other people's sins. Now, we might be persecuted. In fact, Jesus says we will be persecuted. But what's amazing is that when people are like, I'm going to be good, it's like Jesus didn't die on the cross to say, you know what, I died, but you know, if you're really good, you could probably do it. He just said, dude, I did it for you. All you have to do is just believe in me. You don't have to do good, you just have to believe in me. So you either trust it or you reject it. I'll say, Katura, would you like to come up? And then here I just want to end with just my final question, and that's this. If Jesus has already paid the cost, are you still carrying the weight? So here's my big, and this is something I think, the first question is a lot for non-Christians, but the second question is for those who call ourselves Christians. And this is why I think we deal so much with, like, we can acknowledge, like, I love Good Friday, like Jesus died, and I get that. So my question is, are you still carrying the weight of that burden? Because I find this is one of the things that so many Christians, including myself, struggle with, is that it's like, yeah, man, I know he did it, but man, I just feel so much shame for what I did. And it's like, yeah, but that's why Jesus died. And if you're holding on to guilt or shame and you need someone to talk to, come see me. Or if you're a female, come see Mac if that's more comfortable. I'll talk to anyone, but I want you to know if you feel uncomfortable, talk to Mac, okay? Because as we end our Good Friday service, okay, I actually want to lift everyone up. Like I really do. I want to lift us all up because we're a few days from Easter. 2 days, right? 2 days. And if you're struggling, now is a great time to have help. Now is a great time to come and be together because we're about to celebrate something amazing. And that's really what Good Friday is about, is to realize that we're 2 days from Easter and God paid for our sins.